Welcome to this Purple Mash Bytes webinar. In this short Mash Byte webinar, we will explore how to use different objects in code and how to program their actions and set their attributes or their properties. Let's start by launching code. If I go into the Tools area and into code here, I'm going to start with Free Code Chimp and launch the app. If I click on my design screen, you'll see that there's a blank scene. I'm going to add a background by clicking on this TV screen at the bottom here. Click on the image question mark here in the background attributes to set my background and choose one of the pre-made backgrounds. Now I want some objects to match my background that I can program using my code window. So first of all, I'm going to drag a character onto here. Let's have a pirate. Now a pirate is not particularly appropriate for my scene, so I'm going to double click on her to change her to something more appropriate, or I could click on her attribute here in the attribute box on the left hand side and change her to a butterfly. So if I click on that, I can then either go to my mini beast category, or I could search for something. Let's try butterfly and select clip art rather than photos, and here's my butterfly. Now my butterfly is a little bit big for my scene, so I can manipulate the attributes on the left hand side to reduce its size, and the size is changed using this scale attribute. So let's reduce her to an appropriate size. So the character, the food, the animal, the princess, the hero, and the emoticon objects all have exactly the same character attributes that I can manipulate when I'm setting my scene. However, the turtle object behaves very differently. Let's drag the turtle object into the scene and you will see that its attributes are very different to that of the character. Let's just have a look at the character attributes first of all. Now, at the moment, my object is called MySprite1, and if I go to the code window, you'll see it's called MySprite1 down here. Now, I want to change that. Let's go back to the design window, click back on my object, and change her name to Butterfly. So I simply type in the box there and press enter, and now you'll see she is called Butterfly. So the attributes of an object determine the state of that particular object when I run my program. So the moment I run my program, if I do that, my object here is stopped. It's not moving anywhere. Now there's no code in the code window at the moment, but if I was to change this movement attribute from stopped to right, for example, that would determine that the butterfly will move right the moment I press play. So let's see that. I didn't program my butterfly's movement using the code blocks. I manipulated the character attribute that applies to its movement. Now let's talk about this allow off screen attribute. At the moment, this object is not allowed off the screen. So when I run and it moves to the right, it will come back on at the left-hand side and it will just keep coming back on to the screen each time it exits, because at the moment it's not allowed off the screen. If I change that to a yes and now run my code, off she goes, she'll exit the screen and not come back on. Let's have a look at this one, show and hide. Again, the moment I press run, my object is showing on the screen. If I want to change it so that when I run my code initially, it is hidden, you can see that it grays out on the actual design, and the moment I press run, you won't see it. The object is there, and in fact it is moving right as we speak, but you can't see it because it's hidden. I could then program it using my code blocks for it to come back at some other point later in my code. Let's see the last attribute that I can manipulate. This is a brand new attribute into code, which allows me as a player to drag my object around the screen when I'm running my code. By default, the draggable attribute of all objects is set to no. If I change that to a yes, I can then drag my object around the scene when I press run. Now I'll need to make it visible so you can see how that works. Let's stop her movement as well and let's run the code. I can now drag my object around the screen using my cursor and my trackpad. Once I have changed the character attributes of my object on the screen, I could then clone that character by clicking the clone button, and you'll see I now have two butterflies with exactly the same attributes, except that my second butterfly, my cloned butterfly, now has a different name. So I would need to rewrite that and call it butterfly 2. Let's have a look at the character attributes of a turtle. Here is my super turtle. Again, I can change his name. I can change his image. Let's make him an orange turtle. I can change the angle that he's facing. I can change his scale. I can make it so that he's hidden initially when I press run, and again I can change him to draggable. Let's have a look at a button object. So here is my button object, which I'm going to use to click on to move my turtle. So let's change the name of the button here in the button attributes so that I know what the button's purpose is. Now, again, when someone plays my game, they'll need to know what my button does. So I'll need to change the text here so that it's obvious what the button does when I run my code. I can then change the text size, which will increase and decrease the size of the button itself, change the text color and the background. So here is my button. I'm going to position it where I want it to be. Now that we've set up our objects and we've manipulated their attributes so that they will do exactly what we want them to do when I run the code, I can then program them on the code window. So the first thing I want to do is to program my button so that when I click on the button, and you'll see when I drag move turtle button into the code window, it automatically has a click event there. So when I click on the move turtle button, I want Yertle the turtle to move. So a turtle behaves like an object in Logo. So it has forwards, backwards, anti-clockwise, clockwise turns. I can also set the pen color and set the pen down so that it will actually draw a square or draw a shape as it moves. I can set the pen thickness, I can hide it, show it, I can make it speak, and I can change it to another image as well. Let's make it go forward 3 steps. Let's see what that code will do. Let's run my code, click on the button, and my turtle goes forward 3 steps. Let's program the actions of my butterfly now. I'm going to drag a butterfly object into the code window. You'll notice the actions for this particular object are very different to those of a turtle. So this behaves very differently. If I make the butterfly go up, if I run my code, the butterfly will keep moving and off it goes. Let's program the second butterfly. This time I'm going to actually click on the butterfly. So when I click on butterfly 2 is going to go left. So now I have 3 actions happening for my 3 objects. Let's run my code. Butterfly number 1 is going to automatically go up by itself. When I click on butterfly 2, it's going to go left. Now the turtle will only move when I click on the button, and it will continue. If I keep clicking it, every time I click it, it will move forward 2 places. One of the other character attributes that your programmers can change is this concept of tagging. At the moment, I have set my scene and I have 2 characters on here, my sprite 1 and my sprite 2. I'm going to turn them into rockets and I'm going to tag them. I'm going to remove that character tag and I'm going to tag them as rockets. So both of these are going to be a rocket object. And let me change their image here. I'm going to choose that one. So I have 2 rockets on there and I can manipulate their size, etc. Let's put another object on here. I'm just going to drag an animal. Now again, I could double click on that animal and change it into a rocket. Now I would take off the animal tag and I would again tag it with the tag rocket. Let's add an astronaut onto my scene as well and change this into an astronaut. And I'm going to make my astronaut draggable. Now what I want to happen is if I run my code, I want my astronaut to be able to jump into any one of these rockets as I play my game. So I've made him draggable and I can do that. And I'm going to press the stop button. Now the reason I've tagged all of these rockets with the tag rocket will make sense once I code it. So I'm going to create a collision detection. If I drag a collision detection into here, you will see I will then have this option here for the astronaut to collide with any of the objects that have been tagged with the tag rocket. So when the astronaut collides with any of the rockets, the astronaut is going to disappear as if he's jumped into the rocket, and all of the rockets are going to take off. I think I need to change the names of my rockets because at the moment they are still called my sprite 1, my sprite 2, etc. and my animal 1. There we go. I've now turned them into 3 different Apollo rockets. When the astronaut collides with any of the rockets, doesn't matter which one it collides with, there we go. I've collided with that rocket on the left-hand side. All the rockets are going to take off. Let's have a look now at Free Code Gibbon or Free Code Gorilla. Free Code Gibbon was designed for years 3s and 4s, and Free Code Gorilla was designed for years 4, 5, 6s. Let's have a look at Free Code Gorilla and how this compares to Free Code Chimp. You'll notice, first of all, I have a lot more commands available for me to program on the left-hand side of my code window. Let's go to my design screen and again add in a background. And this time I'm going to choose an image. Let's choose, again, the same image there with the flowers. Now you'll notice on the left-hand side, instead of just the objects and the button, I have some other objects available to me to program and to drag into my design. I still have the character, the object, the animal, the car, and a shape object. And I have the super turtle as well. So let's drag a turtle in. I also now have a hotspot, which I can position anywhere in my code. And we'll have a look at the attributes of that hotspot in a second. Let's look at the pirate character here. Again, I can rename her. I can change her to something more appropriate for my scene. Let's make her smaller. You will notice I have a lot more attributes available to program for this object because now I'm in Free Code Gorilla. I have some of the same attributes. I have the dragability, yes or no. I have the show hide attribute. I have its movement type and its movement. Now its movement type is whether it's going to follow the angle that I program in the code window or whether it's going to be directional, up, down, left or right. I'm going to keep it on directional there. If I change this to down, butterfly will go down the moment I press run. Again, I have the same allow off screen, yes or no. Now you'll notice the X and Y coordinate here. If I move my object around my scene, the X and Y coordinate of my butterfly is changing, and that's being reflected in the character attributes there. Speed will determine how fast my object moves when I program her to move. And friction is how much friction is applied to that object and how fast it will slow down as it moves. So if I now press run, she is going to move down immediately. She's going to come back onto the screen. Her X and Y position will change as she moves around the screen. And she's going to move at a speed of 5, but eventually she will come to a stop because this friction attribute here will work on her movement. Let's press run and see what happens. So let's have a look at my turtle. So my super turtle again has its name, its image, and again, it has an X and Y value of its relative position on the design. It has its angle, and I can change that again to position the way it's facing, its scale, its show hide, and its dragability. Let's have a look at this hotspot. Hotspots are a new feature in code that enable your programmers to identify a section of the scene into which some of the objects can move. Once they move into that hotspot, then you can program certain actions to happen. If I move the hotspot over the sun there, I'm going to call this hotspot sun. By default, the hotspot is hidden in my code. So if I press run, you won't see that hotspot there. It is there, but it's just not visible. If I make it visible, you can see the color of it there. It's a bright red rectangle. Now I'm going to hide it again. So let's reduce its height and reduce its width so that it sits just over the sun. Let's have a look now at the form and text objects that I can drag onto my scene. So again, I have a button that I can program. So the attributes that I can program for a button in Free Code Gibbon and Gorilla are the same, apart from the X and Y value that I can manipulate here. You also have other elements, such as a number element that you could use to count a score in your game, along with your variables when you're programming variables. You also have an input box that would require some input from the player or the user. And you have a text option at the top there as well, which I could pop up here. Let's move this one. And I could actually write in there exactly what my game is about. All of the attributes can be manipulated. So I can change the border width, the border color, the text size, the text color, and the font, its relative position on the screen, and its show and hide. Let's go to my code window. And I'm going to do exactly as I did in my previous two-code chimp. If I drag the turtle turn button into my code window, when I click on the turtle turn, I'm going to make the turtle turn clockwise 10 degrees each time. Now, every time I click on that button, you will see the turtle is turning 10 degrees each time. Now I need to think about how I'm going to make my turtle move forward to start with. So I'm going to program a key press event. So when I press the forward arrow on my keyboard, my super turtle is going to move forward 4 steps. Let's run that. And if I press the arrow on my keyboard, you can see it's moving forward. I'm going to turn my turtle, click on the button, turn my turtle again, click on the button, turn my turtle again. You get the idea. Now, eventually, my turtle might run into my hotspot. Let's program that hotspot to do something. Let's drag the hotspot enter into my code window. When the super turtle enters the sun hotspot, what do I want to happen? I want the super turtle to turn into a different character. So let's click on that image button and let's turn the turtle into a superhero. I also would like the turtle to speak. I could also add some sound in here. If I drag my sound option into there, I could record my own voice using the microphone on my device. Let's run my code and see what happens. So I'm going to use my arrows to move my turtle. Click on the button, move my arrow each time. Let's turn him. Eventually, he will go into the sun. I flew too close to the sun and now I am a superhero. And he's going to stay a superhero until I program him to do something else. So as you can see in FreeCode Gibbon and Gorilla, you have a lot more objects available to add to your design, and you also have additional attributes that you can manipulate and program to program the different objects that you put on your scene. And then you can code them to your heart's content. The only limit then is your imagination and your creativity. I hope you and the programmers in your class have lots of fun manipulating the object attributes and programming the actions that are available to them in code.